Hey, Archie, we've got viewers that are asking us to tell some tales from the trenches.
Well, Rob, we've got plenty of those. Weekly wisdom to help you retire and stay that way. This is Last Paycheck. Well, welcome back to the Last Paycheck podcast, brought to you by Hoxton Planning and Management. We're your hosts, CFP professionals Archie Hoxton and Rob Hoxton. And today, we're going to cover a topic that was requested by a viewer, and it's sort of like a tales from the trenches. So stories from our practice and our experience as financial planners. And we've picked a couple, one that's more inspiring and meaningful, another that's more of kind of a cautionary tale. We've seen lots of versions of these, and in reality, most of the stories that we capture in our experience are the little victories or the little, missteps along the way that accumulate that we witness over time. But if you hear these and you feel inspired or you feel worried, we do have on our website a financial freedom score. It's a little quiz. It's super quick, won't take you long, but it'll give you a sense of how prepared you are for financial freedom. So the website is linked in the description. Check it out. Take the quiz.
It's free.
It's free.
Yep.
So, and feel free to reach out.
Hey, before we get started, we should say that we have materially changed these stories that we're going to talk about, so that even if we're talking about your story, you're not going to know we're talking about your story. So yeah, to protect the innocent and of course confidentiality.
Yeah. Well, and like I said, we have seen each of these stories is almost a carbon copy of like 10 other similar stories that we've got. And in our work, we get to see sort of the inside of, the sort of inner world that people inhabit, that, finances are very private, and it's connected with lots of other sort of private things that people don't normally share with the world. So you get to see these like special moments and big victories, inspiring moments, and also some, scary things that have real consequences. So
why don't you go ahead and tell yours first, and then
Yeah.
I'll go second.
Mine is the cautionary tale. This was actually from my days working at a much larger firm. It's something that I still think back to as a cautionary tale that I actually share with people who are having similar tendency or fear. And it may be something that you've experienced yourself, and it comes from, kind of that FOMO or that fear-greed cycle that we experience as investors. So, this is when I was working in a much larger firm. At this firm, we would, when an advisor would leave, their clients would be dispersed between the other advisors. So you would inherit clients as advisors left. So it was a pretty common experience. And so you would have someone that you'd never met before, who now you are providing them advice and managing their money for them. And so early on in a transition, there's often breakage. Like if they have someone else in there, another advisor in their ear, or a friend that's trying to convince them to go another route, that's often when that happens. In this case, this person had a friend who had been involved in an investment club. And this client of mine was telling me that her friend had said, well, I don't know why you're investing in bonds. I don't know why you're, diversifying. You should just buy FANG stocks.
Remind us what FANG stands for.
FANG is sort of like a group of tech stocks that was, now it's sort of like the Magnificent Seven's the big one, but a few years back, FANG was like the big deal. So it's Facebook, Apple, Amazon, Netflix, and Google.
Some of those companies have had name changes as well along the way.
Yeah. So It's a group of really, high growth, high risk tech stocks primarily. And this came at a time where we had been riding on a fantastic bull market for a long time.
Kind of like now.
Yeah, sort of like now, but much longer.
Yeah.
And, there's an old saying that a rising tide raises all ships, right? It's not hard to build a good portfolio in a bull market because most stuff is going up. And if you buy the 5, 6, 7 most popular, highest growth stocks, it's easy to feel like it's because you know what you're doing and that qualifies you to give advice. So that's what this friend of my client did. And I told her, you're retired. You are living on this money. You cannot afford to take that kind of risk. As much as you might have the fear of missing out on opportunity, there's a lot that this person who's, an amateur investor.
Well, and they probably had some of it in their S&P 500 fund.
Right.
If they had that as a core holding.
Right. They did own that. They did own that, but they owned other things too.
Right.
Because that was the prudent decision for a retiree living on their money. But, I was brand new. It was the first time I'd ever spoken to this person. So, you don't have much trust, and she trusted her friend, which is a reasonable thing to do. But her friend did not know what she did not know about retirement planning, about investing in general.
About her own financial situation even, right?
Right. Yeah. She had not gone through with this client on her whole financial situation. So she ended up leaving the company that I was working for and going and following this person's advice. Now, this was right before the largest bear market we've had in quite a while. And I wasn't able to keep in touch with her. That was part of the policy. If a client leaves, you can't go, I don't lose access to her contact information, and it's for the best. But I can only imagine taking your friend's advice saying, trust me, I've done really well. You should just buy these 5 or 6 stocks. And then those stocks cumulatively are nearly cut in half over the course of 6 months. And you're living on this money. This is your retirement money.
So you don't have a way of knowing if after she liquidated her portfolio and bought those 5 stocks, whether she panicked after dropping 50% and sold at the worst possible time. You don't have a way of knowing that.
I don't have any way of knowing that.
Yeah.
But I do know that if she had followed through with that, she may have panic sold. But even if she didn't, she was living on that money and she had to sell substantially more in shares for her living expenses than had she not, and had she had a more prudent investment portfolio. So the cautionary tale, I think the lesson is be careful who you take advice from, because people, as human beings, we don't know how much we don't know about a topic. There's that curve that, you don't know anything, and then you know a little bit, and your confidence goes way up. But the more you learn, the more your confidence crashes. Yeah, and then eventually you get to like a middle ground.
Yeah, the older you get, the more you realize you don't know. Yeah. So maybe I can tell my story since we have a limited amount of time. So this is kind of it's kind of a sad and a happy story at the same time. What I love about it is it's not about necessarily investing. It's kind of the soft side of financial planning and the relationships, these long-term relationships, 30, 40-year relationships that people have with their financial planners. And as somebody who's been doing it now for 34 years, I have a lot of those relationships, and they are so rich and so valuable to me, and such an important part of what makes life wonderful for me, that it's what makes being a financial planner a wonderful thing. And in this case, and now I've changed the details a bit here, but We had a client whose wife was diagnosed with a terminal illness, and and as their financial planner, I knew a lot about their estate plan. So I knew that that they really loved their public library. If you use a public library, I love our public library. It does so much more than just give you access to books. It's just such a hub for a small community.
Yeah.
And they loved their little community library. And she had been a reading teacher, that was her career. And so she loved to go and read to children at the library. And it was a small library. It didn't have a lot in terms of physical resources. But what they wanted to do, and they didn't have children, they just wanted to leave a big portion of their estate to the library so the library could potentially add some space and have a children's reading room. And secretly, he wanted that children's reading room to be named after his wife. She was way too humble to ask for that, but he wanted her name to live on. And when she was diagnosed with this illness, knowing that this was an important charity to them, and a charity that would ultimately receive a very substantial portion of their net worth, I said to them, why don't we, would it be a cool thing to be able to give them some of this money now while you're living, while you can see it happen and enjoy it, and maybe even be able to do your children's reading sessions in a new children's reading room at the library. And they were like, but what about the husband? What if he runs out of money? If the wife passes away, she wanted to make sure that he wouldn't run out of money. And I was like, well, this is a basic financial planning exercise. Why don't you let me run the numbers? And what we found is they were able to get to a point where they could give the library a portion of what they ultimately would end up giving them at the end of their lives. And that, along with a capital campaign, allowed the library to raise enough money to build this addition. And sure enough, before she passed, she was able to spend time reading to children, the thing that she loved the most, in the new wing of the library named in her honor. So it was just such an amazing and sort of a very emotional thing. Her funeral, which happened not long after the project was completed, was it was sad, of course, but it was a very joyful experience at their church. And a big part of it was there were children from that went to the library and that she read to, and there were students that were at all ages that she had taught to read that came to her funeral. It was absolutely amazing. So I just love that story because it talks about the power of relationship and the power of financial planning to help people live, really meaningful lives. And so I just love that story. And it's kind of fun to be able to tell it. But
yeah, that is so in line with the best stories that we have. I think that it is so often not really just about numbers and money, what we do, because life is not just about numbers and money. Money is something that kind of can enable some meaningful things in life. And if the financial planning process, if you think of it in terms of how do I live the most meaningful life possible, and how do I enjoy, I can't take it with me. We did an episode on this. We've been kind of on a little bit of a streak of episodes like this talking about that. But it is so important. If you're on the fence about working with a financial planner, consider that it's not just about money. There are ways that the financial planning process can make your life more meaningful, because it takes money out of it, turns it from an obstacle into your meaning, into your goals, into an enabling force for that.
A great saying about, I think, financial planning is really great financial planning helps people live their lives more richly. And I love the sort of the turn on the phrase there, rich. When people think of rich, they think mostly financial.
Or dessert.
Or dessert, right? So if financial planning can help you live more richly, and so rich meaning just a more fulfilling life as well, not just about how much your portfolio is worth. So yeah.
Yeah, I think it's in a lot of times it's the bigger part of what we do is not the financial, although that is a very important part of it. But the bigger part is at least for me, the part that looms larger in my heart, and my experience of this work is the meaningful aspect and the relationship and the watching people, turn their stress about money into peace and ultimately meaning. I think it's
and
awesome.
Thanks to our viewer who pushed us to talk about this in an episode. I think it's kind of fun. So we would encourage anybody watching, if you have things that you'd like to hear us talk about,
let us know.
Let us know. We'll do it.
Yeah. Or if you have thoughts or questions about anything we talk about, leave us a comment. Subscribe to the channel. We just hit 7,000 subscribers. Awesome milestone. We have you all to thank for that. And then share it with your family and friends, and hit the bell for notifications. We put out a new episode every Wednesday. And we'll look forward to seeing you next time. You've been watching Last Paycheck, weekly wisdom to help you retire and stay that way. If you like this show, be sure to hit like and subscribe. Last Paycheck is available anywhere you get your podcasts.